I cannot tell you how much it hurts me to see the DC universe in such disarray, in such a fractured state. Both in universe, when it comes to them trying to reboot, and out of universe when it comes to the fan base. The fan base is divided into two, well, technically three if you want to count the casual and all that other stuff, but two real main camps. You have the Snyder fans. You want to call them cultists? That's just disrespectful, but whatever. You want to call them Snyder writers, whatever you want to call them. I'm a Zack Snyder fan, but would I be advocating for people to just in my like with deep in my heart would I feel like, oh man, I gotta advocate for people to just not watch any of the movies? No, no, because if I was like wallets are closed for this or that, like it's an unnecessary escalation in my opinion. Because if the movies are bad and people think that they're bad, then they will go naturally to not see them and go see anything else. They'll go see that Lilo and Stitch movie that was something else, I'll tell you, when it comes to what they tried to do with that movie. I didn't go see it because of what I knew they were going to probably change because Disney can't help themselves. But anyways, fact is that you have two camps. You have the Snyder fans and you have the Gunn gooners, the Gunn fans, whatever you want to call them, right? The reason why I am so invested in the DCU being whatever it might be is because I can understand that I want to like the Superman movie. I want to like whatever new movie comes out for DC because I truly want DC to do well. I want to buy more comics. I want to go watch some more movies. I want to have fun and have so much fun watching Superman and all this other stuff that I want to go watch it again and go see the next one and be like, yeah, let's fucking go and all that. I want to feel that deep within my heart and my soul. I want it to set me free, baby. But I know realistically that it's just not the case when it comes to the intent of the director and his direction for the universe and that movie in particular, and when it comes to just the overall vision, or in my opinion, lack thereof, when it comes to the DCU itself. At the end of the day, I just want everybody to have a good fucking time enjoying DC fucking movies, comics, games, all that. Like, truly, sincerely, that's all I really want. I don't want to sit there and advocate for people to be like, Snyder is disgusting and the worst film director ever, and he didn't understand Batman and Superman and the DC universe and all this stuff. Because I feel like he did, in his way, understand the DC universe just as much as Christopher Nolan did when it came to Batman. The problem with James Gunn, in my opinion, is that he is fixated, obsessed, whatever word we want to use here, with making his version of the DC universe, his version of Superman. And I don't mean putting your stamp on it and doing your take like Christopher Nolan did with Batman. No. I mean, he makes them unrecognizable to their comic counterpart in its entirety. Look at the Guardians. It worked for the Guardians because they're C-listers, maybe even D-listers, depending on how you care about them. But he could get away with that. And it's his version of those things. Not a version. Not a version of Batman or Superman or Wonder Woman or The Flash or Mr. Terrific or Guy Gardner or Hawk Girl. Notice that when people talk about this movie, when they praise it, most likely they are seeing, and it's nothing wrong with, seeing what you wanted to see in the movie and you felt good about it. Nothing wrong with that. But I mean, don't blindly praise something because you're going to be blind to probably everything that constitutes what a good movie in that regard is at that point, because it's not, weighed on its own merits, on its own accomplishments and failures. At the end of the day, Zack Snyder was not fucking faultless, of course. He had his flaws. Like, a great example I could point out right now is that he wanted to kill off, like, he wanted the dead Robin to be Dick Grayson. Warner Brothers doing the one smart decision they ever made in that situation, saying, no, we want it to be Jason Todd because we want to do this Nightwing movie that we didn't end up even doing anyway. But that's a great example of him not understanding Batman, in that regard at least. When it comes to the version of Batman that he was going for, which is The Dark Knight Returns, I feel like he succeeded. But when it comes to the version of Batman that has a Bat family, he fundamentally misunderstood. Because if you kill off Dick Grayson, you don't get the Bat family in its entirety and in all its glory. You just don't get it. You have to have Dick Grayson. You have to have Jason Todd. You have to have Tim Drake. All of them written well and respectfully to their comic counterpart. You can do a version of them, a version of Dick Grayson, a version of Jason Todd, a version of Tim Drake and Batman, and etc. But you shouldn't make them unrecognizable. And that's what, the fundamental difference between Zack Snyder and James Gunn is. Zack Snyder respected the material. He respected the Dark Knight Returns version of Batman and did that as best he could. Even replicating a scene from the comic where, he points the gun at the guy and the guy says, I'll kill her. Believe me, I'll do it. I'll shoot her. I'll do it. And he says, I believe you. And in the comic, he shoots him in the head. And in the movie, he shoots the gas tank. But that's a great example of his respect for the material. Whereas James Gunn, he just completely discarded whatever the character was in the comics. Jor-El being a great example. Instead of Jor-El going and telling Superman that you can be a hope of two worlds like in Man of Steel or any other iteration of that character, he makes it a weird amalgamation combination of like Viltrumite stuff and like whatever, even though it's not completely accurate, it's the best one that anybody's going to know of, and it just is nothing like Jor-El. It's James Gunn's Jor-El, who is completely different than any other Jor-El we have ever seen. And it's not like people are going to die on a hill for that, but it's what it does to Jor-El and the mythos of Superman and Superman himself. It completely, fundamentally misunderstands the importance of Jor-El in Superman's story and what he effectively causes by changing that is a Superman that is unrecognizable to any other Superman that we've ever gotten, and not in a good way, not in a hopeful way, not in an uplifting way. To say the damage that he did to Superman in that movie is unfixable is an understatement, because it would have been something to say it's a doctored, edited or messed with, broadcast image or video or whatever. He went out of his way to clarify that that is the actual message, which confirms that the damage is fatal, that the damage cannot be recovered from. Because if you're going to go and do that, you completely ruin whatever the Superman you're going for is, because Lex, in his petty, evil, disgusting, self, is correct, unfortunately, because of what the director did, in assuming that Superman is a threat. He's going to ruin the planet. He's going to conquer the planet. He's going to do this. He's going to do that. He's correct in doing that because of the way that they framed Superman, his legacy, since it was called Superman Legacy before, and everything else with that. Which is why I highlight the fact that Zack Snyder, he wasn't the best at everything that he was doing, of course not. But he had a vision for that character of Superman, and he executed it very, very well, in my opinion. BVS and Batman v Superman, Man of Steel, Justice League, they all paint a picture that Superman is trying to be the hope of two worlds, and at the end of Justice League, he succeeds in doing that. Whereas this Superman, I could never imagine being able to do any of that in any capacity that makes sense or is exciting or uplifting or motivating or inspiring or any of that. Him making a token speech at the end about I'm human and I fail and I mess up over and over and I get up every day. It just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. You can't go into something like that and lead with a Superman that is so fundamentally flawed on the basis that you just want to do something different. It just doesn't hold up to scrutiny or to anybody thinking about it longer than they should be. Well, in this case, longer than the director would probably want them to when they get out of the theater. Zack Snyder, at the end of the day, made something unique. And he was controversial for that. But he showed the fall of a hero and the rise of Superman in his rise throughout those movies. Those trilogy of movies showed Superman rising above all the controversy, all the negative doubt and everything. And he inspired Batman. Now, of course, this Batman is deep within his career, deeply entrenched in his misery and pain and anguish and cynicism and all of that, to the point where he's branding people. And even still, the Gotham citizens are still standing behind him. They still have faith in him, and that's very interesting to me. But in general, you have a character that is unrecognizable, and it does nothing to help the character in any way. Making it his version and not a version fundamentally destroys what you could have with that character. And that goes for every character in that movie, because every character is subjected to this same treatment. Superman and Lex being the easiest ones to point out. I hope that he doesn't do that to Lobo, because Jason Momoa is going to be crying over there. But, if he does, then it's just par for the course, because that's what James Gunn does. He can't make a character a version of that character and be recognizable as easily. And he just doesn't bother to try. He stays in his comfort zone. And it's not to say Zack Snyder doesn't either. Zack Snyder stays in his comfort zone to a point as well. But he also has respect for the material enough to really try to nail what he can, and at least will admit when, okay, maybe that didn't work out, or maybe this didn't work out. He has his slip-ups. But in that version of the universe, in the Snyderverse, or even the DCEU for all its faults, had things that could be at least entertaining and cared about. The DCU less so, because of how muddled and disjointed and completely messy and fucked up that entire universe was, because of Warner Brothers and outside interference from people within that company, and people just not accepting or even trying to see the vision or any entertainment value that could be within it. And the DCU is faring much better in that regard, but the opposite problem is happening, where you're surrounded by so much positivity that you're being coddled. And it's making it so you're not going to improve as much as you could improve. James Gunn has too much of a fixation with making his version of the DC universe. And honestly, I can't get into it. I can't. If I go into the Superman movie and I have a good time, then I'll talk about it. I'll be like, I had a good time. It was surprising me, and I really felt good about it, and I might give it another chance with Supergirl. That's exactly what I'll probably end up saying in some variation of that. And I'll stand behind that. I will not be afraid to admit that for these last videos, or that I had made, that I was a little overzealous, that I jumped the gun. But it did, I did that. And I would say, okay, that was a little much. But the difference is that James Gunn doesn't do that. He doesn't get ahead of the problem and say, okay, like I made some mistakes here. A great example is him making excuses about the box office and saying Superman isn't like a well known character in some areas as much as Batman, and like the anti American sentiment and all this other fucking excuse bullshit that he wanted to pull out. That was fucking pathetic. Because what the fuck are you even talking about? It's Superman. It's Superman. Come on now. Don't treat me and other people like idiots. It's Superman. Don't come over here crying about, oh my god, this and that. Like the Superman is not well known and all that. No. Don't do that. Don't switch up on me now. Don't do that. You're making the film look worse unintentionally by doing that. And Zack Snyder's like real flaw in his universe was that he was too fixated on making these heroes as grounded as possible and to his detriment at points. Now I feel like they all worked out, but I could see why people didn't like it because at the end of the day, when you look at Batman and Superman in those movies, we're witnessing the fall and rise of a hero, and people did not want to see that fall. I'm going to eventually make a video about the fall of the hero and talking about fallen heroes in different movies that I enjoy, and really maybe make a series out of it because it's such a rich topic to talk about, and to explore the depths of that is just a very good thing to do, I feel like. But in general, like you don't have, a way forward with this kind of universe the way you're doing it because if you make Superman unrecognizable to who he is from the comics, and like I said, that works for the Guardians, but that doesn't work for Superman. And if you're doing that for Superman and you're going to be doing that with Supergirl because you're doing a version of Supergirl that not everybody is going to like, it's not the classical version, it's not any version that we've seen before that's going to really, I imagine, resonate as deeply with people as much as you could with the one that people would know and love. Having Supergirl come in drunk and call Superman a bitch is just the icing on the shit cake that you're going to be presenting us potentially in that movie if you don't, course correct a little bit. If you don't say, I found out some new information about that, and now I can say that it's not really your purpose to, go with Earth women and continue our race and make Superman a harem protagonist from a fucking anime. Like, I don't know what the fuck that was all about and why we did that, but we did that. And then the cause that affects is widespread. It's not just one thing that it affects. It affects everything in some way because when you have Batman discover Superman and, maybe eventually become friends with him, he might, maybe make a joke like, hey man, weren't you sent here to like go with Earth women and all that, like are you doing that? Are you not doing that? What was that all about? Like you're going to have to really address it. You're really going to have to unpack it and really have to make Superman uh, I was about to say like, salvageable in that way, but I don't think you could salvage him because of what you did. It's the equivalent of if Zack Snyder did Man of Steel and BVS and then randomly just made Superman's Hope of Two Worlds thing completely false and it's a different thing entirely. It just hurts the character to its core. And I just have such a distaste and disgust for that because it's showing that he didn't want to make a Superman movie. He wanted to make his Superman movie, and that his Superman is not going to be everybody's favorite. It's just not. Like I don't think. And if it is, more power to you. You're happy with it. You're happy with it. But when I look at Man of Steel and Batman v Superman and Justice League and even other versions of the character, like in my adventures with Superman or the DCAU, the classic Goat, all that, or Batman and Superman, Crisis on Two Earths, or any of these other movies. that have Superman in it, they're true to the character. In whatever way they can be, they are true to the character. They do not make any apologies for that. And yet James Gunn had this obsession with making his version, and I just can't get into that when you don't respect the character enough to do something cool or meaningful or inspirational or anything like that. That's true to the character. It just doesn't work. And I'm not a stickler for, oh, it has to be comic accurate. It has to be respectful to the comics. It has to be this. It doesn't have to be. You just have to show a version of the character that's really, really interesting or thought provoking or cool or fun or anything like that. Like if I'm doing a Superman movie, I'm gonna start out, really showing Superman be this really hopeful figure. Don't do a text scroll telling me about how long this universe has been around and lazily doing world building and then saying Superman's been defeated and show him on the ground. Oh man, oh man, like that doesn't inspire hope. That doesn't make Superman look strong. It makes him look weak and ineffective, and it hurts the perception that Superman is this beacon of hope, of strength and character and moral fiber and all this stuff. Also, changing the truth, justice, and the American way to truth, justice, and a better tomorrow just shows exactly what I've been talking about, what I've been illustrating in this video. Whether you went 1 minute into it or not at all, I've been trying to go and illustrate the fact that if you change something like that, that's so fundamental to the character, it shows exactly what I'm saying, which is his version of Superman, not a version, because a version could maybe still have that. And maybe eventually it goes to truth, justice, and the American way because you want to still uphold the core essence of that character. It's like making Batman's, iconic, I am vengeance. I am the night. I am Batman. Doing that and then changing it to something else that isn't that. It just would completely hurt that character. Just fucking hurt him in a way that is fundamentally ruining whatever you could have, whatever you have in general with that character. And I can't sit there and act like I'm okay with that I'm happy about that. Like, I want, like I said in this video, to enjoy all of these DC movies that I'm potentially going to be getting, or the shows that I'm going to be getting, or all of these things that we're all going to be getting. I want to enjoy them. I want to have a good time. I want to have fun with them. I want to show other people them. I want to talk about them more in a positive way. I don't want to be negative about them. I don't like being negative about DC. I'm more of a DC fan than a Marvel fan, but I do like both. I like comics in general. I love comics in general. I'm not going to sit there and want to be like, oh my God, this shit was trash and we don't want to support it and it's fucking awful and it'll never be good. I don't want to do that. And when I do that, it comes from a place of passion and just resentment to the fact that I have to be so upfront and blunt and maybe even mean about, how I just can't agree with the direction. And I can't support the direction that it's going. Because it's going into fucking the Titanic and the iceberg and all of that. It's not going to end well. It's just not. Case in point, Superman 2025 is the lowest rate, lowest fucking box office in China in modern history. And no one's sitting there talking about that. That's a big fucking deal that China's like, yeah, mind you, there is a Chinese Superman in the comics that they could adapt if they wanted to really be like, oh, China, please, please give us another chance, baby, please. They could do that. Will they? Probably not. But it would be, it would be hilarious to see them try because I actually do think the character of this Chinese Superman is actually pretty cool. He has a cool suit. If you look it up on Google and all that, it looks cool. You could do something cool with that. But the fact that you have people just, running defense for this movie, night and day, every day, whatever they can type shit. Nah. It just, You don't need to defend this movie like that. And if you do, okay, fine. I ain't gonna hold you on that. You do what you want to do. But the movie should be able to stand on its own merits. The movies that I named in this video, Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, Zack Snyder's Justice League, the Snyder Cut, the thing that people said didn't exist and shit. Yeah, those all stand on their own 2 feet. This movie certainly does too, but does it fundamentally nail Superman as a character? I don't think so. If I go into the movie and I feel like it's just a fun, Superman movie, and it's not really a Superman movie, maybe Superman and his amazing friends, which it ain't even that, because nobody's friends with this man like that. That's like, oh, Superman, you need some help, man. Like, no, nobody's doing that. No, nobody in the Justice Gang or whatever is like, yeah, Superman, I was wrong about you. We might be able to team up one of these days. No one is doing that. So either way, it's sad to me that I have to make a video. Well, I wouldn't say have to. I'm making the choice, obviously, but still, it's like it's sad to go and talk about DC and feel this negatively about it, because I feel like we had a very special thing with the beginning of the DCU before it got fucked up, and the Snyderverse with the trilogy of movies and potentially Man of Steel 2 and Justice League 2 and 3 and the Batman movie that we could have gotten. I'm not going to sit there and, say, oh, like I said, I'm not going to be like, oh, yeah, you shouldn't watch these movies and all that stuff. No, you enjoy them if you want to your heart's content. But I feel like both the Snyder fans and the Gunn fans should be able to understand, potentially at least, unlikely realistically, but potentially, be able to understand why both parties are so strongly advocating for their side. With the Gunn fans, though I could call them gun gooners if I want to be disrespectful, I ain't gonna do that. The Gunn fans all want to see this dude make a universe that's a beautiful rendition of the DC universe with all this potential and hype and all this stuff. And that's okay. That's more power to them. If they want that, I hope they get that. But you have to understand, the Snyder fans all collectively fought. They fought for the Snyder Cut. They believed in it. And for Warner Brothers to look at that, see how good it did, and say, I don't think we care enough to do anything with this, and we probably never did anyway, so let's get rid of that. That's a complete betrayal of an audience that showed adamantly, passionately, that they want this. And that's not going to go away. That's not going to go away. So when people say, oh, it's Snyder cultist and this Zack Snyder this and the Snyder cut and all this shit, just demonizing and making fun of and doing all this shit for the Snyder fans, it just makes all these James Gunn supporters, that ones that are actually just trying to enjoy their time, makes them look bad. Makes them look terrible. Because why are you out here telling these people that are just fans of a universe that got completely shafted, along with Henry Cavill and everybody else in that damn Justice League, excluding Jason Momoa? How are you gonna, basically write them off as just cultists? It's such a disgusting thing to do. And it's so widespread and so popular to do that people just buy into it and do it, and it's disgusting. It's like if I sat here in this entire video, in the entirety of it, however long it's been, and said, oh yeah, the DCU has no hope of fucking continuing and whatever, and it's trash, and it'll never be good, and we don't need to support that shit, and restore the Snyderverse, and all this shit, it would be completely stupid. Stupid. Ill-advised, short-sighted, and just plain disrespectful. I'm trying to be respectful to both sides and say, you both want something and you both have the right to want that. So when I see comments on a video saying, oh yeah, yeah, Batman and Superman movie, yeah, that worked out well last time. Like, yeah, maybe it didn't work out to you, but it did well financially. It didn't do well because of word of mouth. But that movie had a message. It had things to say, and it was I'd say, a beautiful way of showing that message. It did its job, and it nailed the landing, in my opinion. Was it, hastily kind of, thrown in there when it came to BVS being a part of this slate because Warner Brothers? Yeah, definitely. Because Zack Snyder probably wanted to do Man of Steel too, but they said, no, 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 we gotta do Batman v Superman. You see that Civil War movie over there? We gotta do that. Again, Zack Snyder didn't get the luxury of or benefit of the people's support and the studio's support. He got the complete opposite. The man was going through a personal tragedy and he still worked on Justice League. I'm not going to call out James Gunn and say, anything like that, God forbid, would happen to him. But is he going to be able to, stomach what he's going to get if people just reject his universe at some point? He couldn't even stomach it when he got fired from Marvel. And he put it in his Superman movie about all the monkeys and the super shit and all this shit, which is clearly a fucking coping response to what happened to him. PTSD that happened to him because of his own actions, his own tweets that he did, disgusting as they were, he's reacting to that. Should he be doing it in a Superman movie? Probably not. But that's exactly what that was. Like I said, if I go into this movie and I feel like, oh man, that was just a fun movie anyway, whatever, cool. I'm not going to sit there and lie to people that watch this video for longer than fucking 10 seconds or whatever and say, oh yeah, it was this and that, it was great. Am I going to fucking glaze the movie? Am I going to lie to you about the movie? Am I going to say it was the most comic accurate, the most beautiful, amazing thing I've ever seen in my life? I cried 13 or 14 times. It was amazing, baby. It was the best. I might make a silly video like that at some point, sure, but I won't be lying to you about it. I won't be lying to you about that shit because I value the integrity of the viewer, the integrity of the person that is watching that material and what they want out of it, what they could have out of it. And I respect the characters. And the audience should be able to have a good time and feel like their character that they love is respected. I don't feel like James Gunn understands that if you do a Superman movie and he's fundamentally completely devoid of any of these things that Superman is supposed to be, excluding the bare minimum, and that's kind of just tacked in there because, we got to, it just comes off as disingenuous and put on. So, it is what it is on that. You can't sit there and I'd say demonize an audience or a fan base for wanting something because it would be very easy to go and hate on something. It's so much easier to hate on something than to construct something that could accommodate for both things and put them together and try to say, okay, you want something, they want something, we all want something. Let's see what we can do to get that. So I really want the DCU to do a good job at recovering from potential damages, from doing anything that could make people just hop off the train and say, I'm not coming back. I want them to do well. But do I have faith that they'll do well? No. Do I believe that they'll do well? No. But am I going to go into the movie hating it? No. Am I going to go into the movie potentially if I see it in the theaters wanting to, be like, oh, this shit is trash, super shit? No. No, I'm not. I'm going to go in with a fresh, open mind and say, okay, what do you got? What do you got for me? The same thing I wish that people did for Man of Steel or Batman v Superman or Justice League. But they, some of them, most of them maybe, didn't. And, it's just very telling. It's very telling that people will run defense for a movie because it aligns with what they wanted it to be. And that's fine. If you, like I said, if you enjoy it, you enjoy it. But running defense and then acting like the other side has no reason to want something different is, I feel, completely disrespectful. Completely disrespectful. And I can't stand for that. So hopefully the DCU has its day to shine in the sun and we get everything we want if you're fans of that. And I'm not part of that. We, at least, maybe not. Maybe I could be. Who knows? Maybe I turn a new leaf. I say, oh yeah, man, the DCU. I had doubts. but it's something I can at least look into and say, oh yeah, maybe I'll go see another one. I hope so. But I can't blame somebody for being like, or really be like, oh, what the fuck is wrong with you? For being like, oh, I'm hesitant. I don't want to go to the theater and pay however much money I'd have to pay to go see this Superman movie when I have such doubts. I can't blame them for that, nor would I, because if you were a fan of the DCU, the DCEU, excuse me, uh, this is why you shouldn't be doing such close terminology to the other one or the other. But either way, it is what it is. The DCU has the hope of a good future ahead of it potentially, maybe. And the DCEU got completely, went into train wreck city, and it just never recovered. The Snyderverse, it had its moment to shine in the sun, and then they cut you off. They cut you off at the fucking legs and said, you ain't getting that shit. So I can't imagine how angry that would make people that supported it the entire time. I was supportive of it from the beginning, and I certainly wasn't happy. I wasn't happy about that. And neither were any of the other Snyder fans that wanted to see Justice League 2 and 3 and Man of Steel 2 and see maybe Shazam and Superman versus Black Adam, like the animated movie that they did. We couldn't get any of that potentially because it just wasn't to be. So it is what it is. Hopefully we get some good DC content, but I ain't gonna hold my breath. But I can't blame people for wanting something that they could have had. Everybody wants something that they could have had. It's human nature to want something that you could have. So I don't feel like people are being respectful to that. And the same thing goes for the James Gunn DCU. If they could have a good future in the future here, then I would want to be respectful of that. I'd be like, yeah, you should get everything that you want. Just because I couldn't and the other people couldn't doesn't mean I don't want them to get something better. I do. But if it ends badly, if history repeats itself, don't be surprised when the Snyder fans or other people say, well, you reap what you sow or told you so or whatever. I wouldn't want to do that, though I would be tempted. No, I wouldn't want to. Because at the end of the day, what good does it do to tear down everybody else? To tear down things? To say, oh, this shit just ain't it, and it never will be. No. I want hope for DC to shine through, and that's all I ever want with that.